Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to plunge into some really fascinating source material, aiming to get you truly well-informed and fast.
That's right.
Today, well, we're unlocking something pretty special. An unparalleled trove of intelligence, really pulling back the curtain on one of history's most notoriously secretive organizations, the KGB.
Yeah, it's quite a story.
Our mission really is to unpack the incredible story of Vasily Mitrokhin and this huge archive he bravely brought over to the West.
And it's not just, a dry historical account. This stuff gets you right into the strategic thinking, the pervasive paranoia, and just the human drama behind the Soviet state.
It feels like a direct route to understanding that mindset behind the Iron Curtain.
Exactly. It offers surprising facts, some mind-boggling operations, and really deep insights into how a global power operated in the shadows. We're talking spies, counter-spies.
Audacious deception.
Devastating internal purges, yeah. And the sheer scale of the intelligence gathering. I mean, everything from atomic secrets that, shaped the Cold War.
Right.
To the surveillance of, just everyday citizens. And it all comes straight from the pages of the Mitrokhin archive, the KGB in Europe and the West. It's a source that honestly redefines our understanding.
Okay, so let's start with the man himself, the one who made it all possible. Vasily Mitrokhin. A senior officer in Soviet foreign intelligence. Worked there from 1948 right up to 1984.
A long career.
A very long career. And what's just astonishing is that for the last 12 years, from 72 onwards, his actual job was supervising the transfer of the first chief directorate's archive.
Can you imagine? He's literally in charge of the very secrets he's planning to expose. The audacity is, it's almost unbelievable.
How did he even do it, copying all that material?
Well, over those 12 years, he secretly copied just vast numbers of top-secret files. He started pretty low-tech, initially just trying to memorize names and key facts each night.
Wow, that must have been slow.
Incredibly slow. So he changed tactics, started meticulously transcribing notes, tiny, minuscule handwriting onto scraps of paper.
And then how did he get them out?
He'd crumple them up, smuggle them out in his shoes. Eventually he got bolder, started using his jacket, trouser pockets.
Day after day for 12 years. The risk. It's hard to fathom. What drove him? What was the turning point?
It seems his motivation was really deeply personal, rooted in this profound sense of outrage. It was sparked, primarily anyway, by the official condemnation of Boris Pasternak's novel Dr. Zhivago back in 1958.
Oh, okay.
Mitrokhin saw it as just cultural barbarism. He was so angry he actually sent an anonymous letter of protest to a Soviet literary newspaper, Literaturnaya Gazeta.
No way. That's risky.
Extremely. He disguised his handwriting, but even then, he was terrified. He actually worried his own saliva on the envelope seal could betray him through DNA analysis later.
Wow. The paranoia of the system itself. Even a silent protest felt like a huge risk.
Exactly. And that, combined with the brutal crushing of the Prague Spring in 1968, that really solidified his belief. He decided the Soviet system was fundamentally unreformable.
Unreformable.
Yeah. He saw the Russian people caught in the grip of what he called this three-headed hydra: the party, the privileged nomenclatura elite, and of course the omnipresent KGB.
So his goal became?
His ultimate ambition, and it didn't change for nearly 30 years, was just to publish as much of this explosive material as possible.
And when it finally did get published, the reaction was huge, wasn't it? You can't really talk about the Mitrokhin archive without mentioning Mrs. Norwood.
Oh, absolutely. Melita Norwood.
The serialization in the Times in '99, it had this immediate dramatic impact, especially that sensational revelation of the 87-year-old great-granny spy.
Yeah, I remember the pictures. Her walking down her garden path.
Totally composed. And she famously told reporters, "I thought I got away with it, but also, I'm not that surprised it's finally come out."
The image, right. With her Che Guevara mug, the Stop Trident posters, known for selling homemade chutney for Cuba support groups, it really captivated people.
And she was purely ideological, wasn't she?
Completely. An ideological agent. Never worked for money. Apparently even refused further payments after she retired. But her S&T contributions got her the Order of the Red Banner.
Amazing. And how did the Russians react to all this coming out?
Well, that revelation immediately rattled them.
Right.
The SVR, that's the Foreign Intelligence Service, the successor to the KGB's Foreign Intel Directorate, they wasted no time trying to undermine the archive through what they call active measures, standard playbook, really. They sent these bogus defectors to Western agencies,
right,
all peddling the same manufactured story, that Mitrokhin was actually a plant, chosen to leak only old, redundant agent names.
Did anyone buy it?
No, it was seen as
Right.
pretty poorly conceived, frankly counterproductive. All it really did was underline just how anxious the SVR was about the damage the archive was doing.
Talk about an own goal. It's interesting, though, that paranoia from the SVR, then, trying to discredit the archive, it actually echoes this deep pattern you see throughout Soviet intelligence history.
It really does. To get that, you kind of need to go right back to the start. How the Bolsheviks' own pre-revolutionary clandestine experience shaped everything.
Right, leaders like Lenin, Stalin, they were used to living underground false identities.
And they kept those aliases, those habits of mind, even after the revolution. That whole underground mindset heavily influenced the Cheka, the first pretty brutal Soviet secret police, the KGB's predecessor.
Okay.
Take the infamous Envoys plot, or Lockhart plot, in 1918. The Cheka claimed this shattering blow like a major military battle.
But the reality was.
The reality, according to the archive, was quite different. Politically naive Western diplomats, adventurous, almost tragicomic secret agents like Sidney Riley, his exploits, the book says, oscillated between high adventure and low farce.
So not exactly James Bond, then.
Not quite. Riley apparently once marched up to the Kremlin demanding to see Lenin, who probably had no idea who he was. It was in many ways a pretty farcically inept enemy they were hyping up.
So exaggerating threats, maybe to justify their own methods, that seems to be there from the beginning.
Definitely. And this led to the creation of the illegals. In 1919, they set up a whole department for them, later known as Directorate S agents operating without any diplomatic cover. Absolutely crucial when the regime was an international pariah, you see.
Makes sense. And their methods relied heavily on deception.
Oh, ruthless deception was core. Look at operations Syndicat 1 and Negative 2, aimed at neutralizing, then luring back Boris Savinkov, a leading anti-Bolshevik.
How'd they do that?
Agents provocateurs, playing on Savinkov's own weaknesses. Mitrokhin's note suggests Savinkov had this increasing tendency to fantasize, even claiming Lloyd George once saying "God save the Tsar" to him.
Seriously?
Apparently so. He was captured, made an abject confession, and was almost certainly murdered. Pushed from a window seems the likely story.
Chilling. And there was another big deception operation. Tress.
Yes, Treft was even more successful. Lasted 6 years, used a totally fictitious monarchist underground group to fool the West and emigres.
And did that snare anyone famous?
It snared Sidney Riley again, actually, described by some as an even greater fantasist than Savinkov. At one point, he apparently believed he was Jesus Christ.
Wow.
The irony is the OGPU, the secret police, then didn't seem to realize Riley wasn't really that important anymore. So even in their successes, you see this internal bias, maybe misjudging the target's actual relevance.
Fascinating. So their own narratives could sometimes blind them. But this ruthlessness, this paranoia, it wasn't just directed outwards, was it? It turned inward during the Great Terror.
Oh, absolutely, with devastating results. In the late 1930s, the priority shifted. Hunting enemies of the people became more important than actual intelligence collection.
Even successful officers weren't safe.
Not at all. People like Yakov Serebryansky, head of the Administration for Special Tasks, sabotage, abduction, assassination abroad, hugely successful. Eventually recalled, denounced as a spy, and executed.
How did this internal paranoia affect their broader intelligence?
It profoundly distorted it. Stalin, for example, seemed to regard hunting down Leon Trotsky in Mexico as a higher priority than gathering intelligence on Adolf Hitler right at the start of World War II.
That seems strategically unsound.
To say the least. Later, during the war, Moscow Center got so suspicious they started to believe the Magnificent Five, arguably their best foreign agents, the Cambridge spies, were actually a massive British intelligence deception.
They thought their own best agents were fake.
Exactly. It shows this deep-seated suspicion that constantly undermined their own successes and blinded them to real threats, or made them see threats where maybe there weren't any.
It's a powerful pattern. Okay, let's jump forward to the Cold War proper. We see these ideological spies emerge again, the Cambridge Five, obviously.
Right. Donald MacLean, Guy Burgess, Anthony Blunt, the fourth man, driven by this visionary faith in the communist millennium.
But their methods weren't always smooth. Burgess, for instance.
Yeah, famously undisciplined, apparently scattered secret Foreign Office papers from his briefcase in a pub once. You could just imagine Kim Philby's reaction when Burgess suddenly defected to Moscow with MacLean. Chaos.
Definitely. And it wasn't just the Cambridge lot. We mentioned Mrs. Norwood, HLA.
Exactly. She fits that mold too. Purely ideological, not in it for the money, refused payment later on, got the Order of the Red Banner for her scientific and tech intel.
And then there were the atom spies.
Crucial figures. Theodore Hall, codenamed MLAD, meaning young, probably, as the book says, the youngest major spy of the 20th century. He, along with Klaus Fuchs,
Yes.
they enabled the very first Soviet atomic bomb to be essentially an exact copy of the American bomb tested at Alamogordo.
And an exact copy. That's incredible. Does that suggest they were just copying, not innovating themselves, or was it speed?
It certainly speaks volumes about how valuable that stolen intel was, and their absolute priority was achieving parity fast. Which brings us back to the KGB's skill, their art of deception, particularly with illegals and SIGINT, signals intelligence.
Illegals like William Fischer.
Right, codename Mark,
Yeah.
an English-born Soviet intelligence officer, had this incredibly complex cover story, operated for years in the U.S. without suspicion, even while his own agent, Ted Hall, the atom spy, was being interrogated by the FBI.
Wow. So they really trusted those illegal networks.
Deep faith in them. And they were often right to, especially with SIGINT. The scale was just immense.
How big are we talking?
They had dedicated SIGINT posts called Pochin stations right inside their Washington embassy, overhearing communications from the Pentagon, the FBI, the State Department, even the White House.
That's quite the listening post.
Oh yeah, they gathered top-secret military intel on missile systems, aircraft like the F-15, F-16. They even intercepted faxes from major companies, Boeing, IBM.
Faxes. Right, and there was the Cuba base, too.
The massive GRU base, that's Soviet military intelligence at Lourdes in Cuba, monitoring U.S. Navy communications across the Atlantic. Astonishing access.
It paints a picture of incredible reach, but it wasn't just passive collection, was it? They planned for action, too.
Definitely. Meticulous planning for sabotage. Recording potential targets, power lines, oil pipelines across the West, and hiding arms caches.
Arms caches? Where?
In various Western countries, some were apparently even booby-trapped with Molnia explosives, ready for future operations.
This really makes you wonder, though. How much of this was driven by actual threats versus their own, well, paranoia? Which brings us to Operation Ryan.
Yes, Ryan. A huge joint KGB-GRU operation in the early 1980s, driven by this deeply paranoid interpretation of Reagan's policies.
They thought the U.S. was planning a nuclear first strike.
Moscow Center genuinely seemed to fear it. They demanded these pointless fortnightly reports from stations in the West looking for signs of preparations for this attack.
Even though the officers on the ground.
Officers in Western residencies were skeptical. They knew there were no such preparations, but Moscow insisted. It's a classic case of looking for a conspiracy, even creating one in their own minds.
And they actively tried to create conspiracies, too, through active measures.
Absolutely. Systematic campaigns to discredit dissidents were a major part of it. Andrei Sakharov, KGB chief, Andropov, called him public enemy number one.
What did they do to him?
They tried to fabricate links between him and Western intelligence, or even the Pinochet regime in Chile. Anything to damage his reputation. Deliberate attempts to stop him getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And similar campaigns against others, too.
That's quite disturbing. And they even used major world events like the Kennedy assassination.
Yes, that became fodder for active measures. Trying to deflect blame from Lee Harvey Oswald, who they initially just thought was unstable, and point the finger at the CIA instead.
Wow.
They actually forged a letter, supposedly from Oswald to E. Howard Hunt, a former CIA officer, trying to create a link. Yeah. It just shows their willingness to manipulate public perception on a massive scale.
And it wasn't just disinformation. There were threats of actual physical harm.
Oh, yes. Mitrokhin's archive revealed some chilling plans. Never implemented, thankfully, but they seriously considered schemes to break the legs of ballet dancer defectors like Rudolf Nureyev. Similar thoughts about Natalia Makarova.
Breaks their legs. Just incredible vindictiveness.
And then, of course, the most famous case, the umbrella murder of Georgy Markov in London.
The rice in the telet.
Exactly. Andropov insisted on no direct Soviet participation. But the KGB explicitly provided the poison, the delivery device, and the training to Bulgarian intelligence to carry out the assassination.
It paints this picture of a system absolutely obsessed with total control, internally and externally, which leads us to interventions in the Soviet bloc. Prague Spring, 1968.
A pivotal moment. Andropov, who was KGB chairman then, justified the invasion of Czechoslovakia as simply the only way to preserve Soviet security.
But that clashed completely with the spirit on the ground, didn't it? Those May Day slogans.
Like with the Soviet Union forever, but not a day longer. Captures the mood perfectly. Hopeful, but wanting change.
And the KGB played a role in justifying the invasion.
A crucial and deeply cynical role, they launched Operation Keodoki. Basically, they sent in illegals to fabricate evidence of a supposed counter-revolutionary conspiracy.
Just create a pretext.
Precisely. And Mitrokhin reveals they even went so far as to destroy U.S. documents that actually proved there was no CIA manipulation of the Prague reformers. They actively covered up the truth.
And for Mitrokhin himself, witnessing this.
It was absolutely key. Witnessing its deception firsthand, it just solidified his belief that the Soviet system was utterly unreformable.
A really profound assessment from someone on the inside. And this drive for control, it extended everywhere. Even the church wasn't immune.
Not at all. The KGB was apparently shocked, genuinely alarmed, when Karol Wojtyła, a Pole, was elected Pope John Paul II in 1978.
Why alarmed?
A Polish pope, potentially galvanizing anti-Soviet feeling. Interestingly, though, the archive notes even some senior party members privately rejoiced.
Yeah.
Political jokes went around, like Wojtyła burning his party card.
Uh-huh.
And then came solidarity in Poland. The trade union. Yes. Moscow pushed hard for a crackdown, for martial law. But the Polish leader at the time, Kania, was reluctant. He famously said, "I don't want to go down in history as the butcher of the Polish people."
A contrast to Moscow's view.
Definitely. And later, in a darker twist, after Solidarity leader Lech Walesa was interned, the Polish secret police, the SB, tried to intimidate him. They reminded him of alleged past payments he'd supposedly received for providing information years earlier.
Just constant layers of manipulation.
Exactly. And all this internal control, this surveillance. Oleg Kalugin, a former KGB general himself, privately dismissed much of it as just an elaborately choreographed farce.
A farce. Why?
He argued that the huge effort spent tracking down anonymous letter writers or kids writing seditious graffiti efforts that frequently exceeded those devoted in the West to a major murder inquiry were basically just about discovering enough ideological subversion to justify the KGB's own bloated existence and budget.
That's quite an indictment from a general. So was this widespread control actually effective or just performance?
It certainly created an atmosphere of fear, and they did penetrate institutions. The Russian Orthodox Church, for example. Agents like Metropolitan Nicodim, codename Adamant, were used to suppress dissent and influence international religious groups.
Even controlling religion. And minor groups, too.
Oh, yeah. Even Jehovah's Witnesses were viewed by the head of the Second Chief Directorate as the most hostile of the sectarians. Shows how deep the suspicion of any independent group ran.
It all seems so intense, almost absurd sometimes.
And for a truly bizarre example of that absurdity, you have the 1978 World Chess Championship. Anatoly Karpov, the Soviet champion, versus Viktor Korchnoi, a defector.
Okay.
The KGB deployed active measures to ensure Karpov won. This included using a supposed Russian hypnotist in the audience, whose job was apparently to stare intently at Korchnoi during play to disrupt his concentration.
A hypnotist at a chess match? Seriously?
According to the archive, yes. Utterly surreal. But it just highlights this pervasive, all-encompassing nature of KGB operations. A system so obsessed with control, with ideological victory, it would literally intervene in a chess game.
It really shows how deep that mindset of suspicion and manipulation went, doesn't it? Right through the entire organization.
From the very top down to, well, seemingly trivial competitions. Exactly.
So as we sort of wrap this up, connecting the dots, the Mitrokhin archive really gives you this unparalleled inside look at the KGB.
It does.
From those early, sometimes quite clumsy attempts to catch figures like Sidney Riley.
Right up to its global reach during the Cold War. And these incredibly human stories, people like Mrs. Norwood and, of course, Vasily Mitrokhin himself.
And I think what we learned from this deep dive is that despite all the tactical successes, the moments of, undeniable operational skill,
their grand strategy ultimately failed. That pervasive paranoia, the inability to really understand the West, the constant reliance on active measures and conspiracy theories. It points to a fundamental flaw.
A flaw in the whole approach?
Yeah. This institutionalized paranoia, it distorted their intelligence assessments, it blinded them to real threats, it led them to create imaginary ones. Ultimately, it created a system that was, just as Mitrokhin concluded, unreformable.
It's a really powerful lesson from history, and one that maybe still resonates. The SVR today, the KGB's successor, often expresses resentment about Russia's perceived decline, attributing it to some long-term Western plan.
You still hear echoes of that thinking.
Definitely. So, considering this deep history of suspicion, of active measures that we've uncovered today, how much of what you see in international relations now, even in the information you consume daily, might still be shaped by these historical patterns, by this deeply ingrained mindset.
Hmm.
What might be hidden in plain sight, and how does knowing about this archive help you maybe critically assess current events?
That's a really crucial thought to ponder, isn't it?
It really is. Thank you for diving deep with us today.